Hello again. This is the Navigating the Political Appointment Process webinar. Thank you for everyone that is with us this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Michelle Batchelor. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at In Our Own Voice National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. And we are really honored to be able to sponsor this webinar that's part of the Sexual and Reproductive Justice Rights and Health Blueprint Appointments Project. So just as a little background, the goal of the Appointments Project is to facilitate the placement of highly qualified, diverse issue experts in key positions across the administration, the incoming administration, to further our policy priorities. And you should see a link in your in the chat that you can access to learn more about the Appointments Project, but we'll also be talking about it throughout this webinar. But so far with the appointments process through the blueprint, we've had significant success with over 370 applicants in the last couple of months that have come through the program. And of those, nearly 45% of those are women of color. But we know we can do better, and we want to do better. We want more diversity. We want people that really speak to the sexual and reproductive health needs of people of color. And so our goal is to engage hundreds of more candidates that represent many different backgrounds. And we want to continue to focus particularly on powerful women of color. And we have a few of them with us here today that we're going to hear from. So really honored to be able to have the opportunity to introduce Melanie Newman, who is the Senior Vice President of Communications and Culture at Planned Parenthood, as well as Nadia Garnett, who is a strategic partner at Deliver Strategies. And so with that, I'm going to ask each of them to take a few minutes to introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into the program so that we can really hear about what it's like to go through this process. So Melanie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Michelle, and thank you so much for having me today. As mentioned, I am currently at Planned Parenthood, and I am a former Obama administration appointee. I was appointed in the first term in February. I started February 2009, so I worked on the Obama campaign and was appointed to be press secretary at HUD, and was the first political appointee in the public affairs office at HUD. I left the administration to work at the DNC during the re-elect in the 2012 cycle and came back into the administration in the second term as assistant secretary for public affairs at HUD. I also worked as comms director at OMB, whatever that title was, and director of public affairs at the U.S. Department of Justice in the last year and a half of the Obama administration. So I went through the PPO process multiple rounds and am excited to talk about that experience today. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. I'm Nadia Garnett. I am a strategic partner at Deliver Strategies direct mail public affairs firm in Washington, D.C. We do mail for political campaigns, so I apologize for all of you all who had to receive numerous rounds of our mail during last election cycle. I am a Clinton White House alum. I joined the administration in March of 2000, and I worked in the Office of Presidential Personnel, working with those in all ranges of appointments from the Senate confirmed down to the Schedule C appointments. And since that time, I have worked on Democratic campaigns and for Democratic-leaning organizations across the country.
Wow, impressive. Like, I didn't even know all that. That's really impressive. Thank you. Really excited to hear from you all. So I don't want to delay any longer. Let's just jump right in to the program. Just to let folks know, after we hear a little bit more detail from you all, we'll have an opportunity for questions from the webinar participants. So as people are tuning in, please use the chat function to put in any questions you have, because we want to make sure that we take advantage of, you know, the expertise that we have with us tonight. So with that, Melanie, I'm going to turn it over to you, back over to you.
Sure. So I'll just give some context. First of all, I just want to note that Nadia and I are very close friends. And Nadia happens to be the person who walked me through the PPO process in the year 2008 when I didn't know what I was doing and wasn't able, we didn't have webinars like this at the time to help us walk through the process. And I wasn't, you know, I didn't have organizational support. So Nadia really was my partner, walking me through the plum book, helping me to identify what roles I might be suited for, explaining to me what a Schedule C was. I didn't know any of that. So prior to working in the executive branch, I had spent 5 years working on Capitol Hill. I worked for my hometown congressman for 2.5 years and was communications director on the House Judiciary Committee before going to the Obama campaign in 2008. And I didn't have a good sense of the difference in serving in the legislative branch and serving in the executive branch. The levels of different bureaucracies that don't really exist on the legislative side, the application process that didn't necessarily exist on the legislative side. I interned for my hometown congressman, and when I graduated from college, I came here and I started working, and that was pretty much how that happened. But getting into the administration was different. I mentioned that I did work on the campaign, so I had contact with campaign communications leadership. I worked in headquarters in Chicago. I was a regional communications director. And so I had contact with the communication staff from the campaign, who were the same people helping to place staff. That said, I came to HUD quite by happenstance. I saw the White House liaison at the hairdresser and sent her my resume and got an interview and started shortly thereafter. And my work in the executive branch, I will say, is some of the most important, impactful work that I've had in my career. I know working on the Hill, I remember working for Congressman Conyers on the House Judiciary Committee, and I asked him if he thought he would ever leave Congress. As many of you know, he did leave Congress and he passed away recently. But I asked him if he thought he would leave, and he said, "Why would I ever do that? I'm not gonna do his voice because it doesn't feel funny anymore now that he's passed away." But he said, "Why would I leave and go home and read the paper and not be able to do anything about the things that I read in the paper?" And that is the power to me of working in the federal government in general, is the power to really address the world's problems. And I know that it sounds almost Pollyanna-ish after the 4 years that we've had, where the federal government created the problems that we see in front of us today, many of them. But that was the best thing about waking up and going to work every day, was that I knew we were working toward making a better world. At HUD, we were working toward addressing inequality and income mobility, and working with across agencies with the Department of Education and HHS and the EPA on opportunity zones, creating neighborhood assets in neighborhoods that had been historically disadvantaged and disenfranchised. That's the kind of work that I set out to do in my life, is to really work toward impact. And there is no better place to do that than in the federal government in general, but in the executive branch in particular, where you are creating and implementing programs to really address the problems of the world. So that's what we did at HUD. At at the Office of Management and Budget. That office, OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, is an agency that sits within the White House complex, and I worked in the executive office, the Eisenhower Executive Office building across from the White House. That agency really delivers the budget every year that the president delivers to Congress, and really helps to provide the narrative and roll around the priorities of the federal government. And at the time that I was there, Ferguson was happening. And I remember talking to the director of OMB, who at the time was Sean Donovan, and saying, you know, there are tanks on the streets. Who's funding that program? Why do we need that program? That's the kind of work, and that program was ended. It was not my idea. It was obviously a collaborative discussion, but those are the kind of solutions and problems that you work on in the federal government that I don't think there is any other place one can be employed where you can be as impactful as that. And that is really that work sits with me, and it's still having the opportunity to do that, and the time that I spent working in the executive branch is the best time of my life. That said, it was also certainly the most pressured I had felt up to that point in my life. It is certainly stress inducing, scary. It can be scary, as we saw last week for our colleagues who work on the Hill. And if we have Hill staff on, I give you all of my support. I've walked those halls. I have evacuated those buildings. I know that was very scary, but it is, again, for me, it was one of the most fulfilling experiences I've had. And I'll say we've been using some acronyms here, and everyone may not know. The PPO is the Presidential Personnel Office. So the Presidential Personnel Office helps to place political appointees all across the executive branch of government. Right now, the transition team has a personnel team that is doing that work. And some of those people are moving into the Presidential Personnel Office and will continue to do that work. And there will be a much bigger infrastructure around that when the president-elect and the vice president-elect take office. But I think I don't want to keep rambling on. It was exciting. It was impactful. It stretched me. I learned a lot about management, about growth, about communications. That's what I do. And I would not be in the role I am in currently if not for the experience I had in the federal government, I think. So I cannot, I hope all of you here are continue to be interested in it, and we'll talk more about, and Nadia is going to talk a little bit more about the sort of ins and outs of actually getting into government and what that may entail. But from my perspective, it changed my life and was incredible. So thank you again for having me.
I started interning when I was a senior in high school in government. My best friend's dad was a lobbyist, and I'm from a very small town of 10,000 people. I did not know what a lobbyist was, but I knew he would go and work in Tallahassee during session, still not fully understanding what session meant. But one of my girlfriend, her and her sister would take a week off and go and work as messengers and pages. And to me, it just sounded cool. You know, I really didn't have any context for it. Neither one of my parents were heavily involved in Democratic politics. They were involved in politics, being Black and in the South, and being a part of the civil rights movement. So, you know, my parents would go to the city commission meetings. With a town that small, I knew all of the elected officials from them. Like my girlfriend's dad was the sheriff. My other girlfriend's dad was grandfather was the mayor. I went to dancing lessons with the state representatives. So my senior year in high school, I did an internship with my state representative, and it changed my entire life. because it's one thing to go to class and read books about the American government. It's another thing to actually go and work in your legislative office and actually answer phone calls and get a sense of what people really need and what they're calling their elected officials and asking for help for. And I worked in an office that didn't treat me like an intern. I was actually helping them with casework. And then I went to Tallahassee and served as a messenger for the week, and I actually got a chance to walk the legislative halls and interact with the governor's office staff and get a real sense of how government actually worked. So I implore those of you who are thinking about, doing this work to spend some time, on Capitol Hill in your state legislatures, going to some of these meetings. I was able to go through and sit in committee meetings and be a fly on the wall and watch the process work in ways that I never would have understood it from the textbooks. I did all this while a student at Florida State University, so I had a chance to intern and work in the governor's offices. I interned in the governor's press office, external affairs office, scheduling office, and then my last semester I had a part-time job working in the governor's press office. So I was actually able to get a sense of understanding of how the governor's internal offices work. I moved to DC shortly after graduation with a dream. I'm like, I'm gonna go to DC, work on Capitol Hill. Didn't really have a clue how all that worked. But I was very fortunate that all the governors have an office in Washington, DC, at the Hall of States building. So I was very fortunate to do my DC job search from the governor's office, and was able to get several job interviews because Governor Childs was a former senator and he still had a lot of staffers that were still on the Hill. What I did not realize was how much Capitol Hill staffers did not get paid. Having worked in the governor's office, I knew what my salary was, and I knew what my salary would have been if I'd stayed there part-time, stayed there full-time after graduation. And then moving to DC and seeing, that committee staffers were getting paid $23,000 a year. And having to justify a $23,000 a year salary to my mother, knowing that I was trying to make ends meet. And she was like, what you cannot do is continue to call home and ask me for money. But it is tough because people don't really tell you, what salaries really are. And I'll talk more about what salaries are when I talk about the process. But I went to go work for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and spent some time doing grassroots lobbying there when AOL was still a popular thing, where people were still having to use dial-up internet, and we were doing blast facts on behalf of those who are returning from the war, and helping them lobby for what was important to them for their veterans benefits. And started grad school at Johns Hopkins University because I thought I needed to get a master's degree in government, and met someone in my grad school class who worked in personnel. Who worked in personnel, who was now one of the political directors at the White House, and knew that I had worked in the governor's office, who knew what all took place within the governor's office with regards to appointments and boards and commissions, and asked me if it was something I was interested in, and I jumped at the opportunity. And I started interviewing for a role in the White House in October of 2019 and didn't get hired until March of 2020, just to tell you how long the process took for me to go work in the White House. My first day at work, I parked, ironically, there's a McDonald's that is on Connecticut Avenue that is right across the street from the new executive office building, which is the brick building right next to the art gallery. And I got there all bright and early. I had on my brand new suit from Charter Club, and I was all very excited. And I was standing at the corner, and I was standing at the corner across the street. President Clinton's motorcade came through. And here I was, very young, from a small town of 10,000 people. Neither one of my parents had graduated from college. And I was about to start I'm still getting teary-eyed, I'll get choked up now. I'm about to start my first day working at the White House. And not just working in the White House, but working in the Office of Presidential Personnel, which is tasked with staffing the administration to carry out the president's mission, and finding people who are dedicated to him and dedicated to the country, who actually could go through and carry out his mission. And while we were in the middle of a campaign cycle, I think what times people forget, you still have to close out the administration. So while a lot of people had left the administration to go work on the Gore-Lieberman campaign, we still had to close out the Clinton-Gore administration. So there were people who were leaving the administration to go work on the campaign, and we still had to hire people from everyone from and I'll go through the acronyms, everyone from cabinet secretaries to Schedule C positions, which are usually, those individuals who are special assistants in the various offices throughout the administration, all the way up to those who, as Melanie mentioned, like deputy assistant secretaries in various agencies. So we had to still go through and staff all of this out. And I remember election night in 2000 and being in Florida and being devastated by the loss, but I had to go back to DC because we still had to close out the administration. So there are things that are always happening that people don't necessarily put in context as to why some of this is important and who keeps all this moving. So while the friends of mine were, in the middle of recount, I was trying to make sure that we were backfilling positions because we still had things that needed to get processed and things that we still could get accomplished while we're still trying to close the government out. So service to me, it has changed my life and changed how I approach the work that I do. I think about my community. I think about people who look like me. I think about people who don't have access the way that we all have access to webinars of this, and try to make sure that I am leaving my mark on the world by helping to make the world a better place, whether it is helping people try to navigate a presidential personnel process and go work in the administration, whether it is making sure people understand the differences in the branches of government, whether it is how I think about who candidates who even run for office and making sure that I'm trying to help the next generation of operatives and candidates to make sure that everyone's voices are at the table. I think once you start down this path, it will have an impact on you the way that you don't necessarily think it will. This, for those of us who've done this, this is more than a job for us. This is nothing about this career is a 9 to 5. I have not had a 9 to 5 job in a very long time. And when I did have a 9 to 5 job, I did not know what to do with myself, quite honestly. It took a very long time to figure out what to do because there was always something to do in other campaign jobs, administrative jobs, White House jobs, and that you're always on and that you're there to serve a good greater than yourself. I want to talk about, personnel itself and the process and how people should think about what this looks like. I know that Melanie mentioned the Plum Book, and I know a few of you all might have heard the Plum Book. The Plum Book is basically the keeper of the jobs. The Plum Book lists all the jobs in the federal government. And if you go through and look at the book, there are several acronyms that are there when you start flipping through the pages. I want you to take a moment and go through and read the foreword and read the introductory pages that are in the book. It's going to be very important because it goes through and it lays out the various types of jobs in the administration. But I also want people to know that there are probably 4,000 political jobs across the federal government, period. So just because, it's a big agency, it does not mean that the agency is full of political jobs. One of the things I think is also important to know is that, and I think, and Melanie can talk about this as well, is while there are a lot of jobs in the government, one of the things that we can also say about this Biden-Harris transition team is that they have made it a priority to get as many people hired day one as possible. Right. So, I think Melanie can talk about like how many people, were hired day one, in the Obama-Biden administration. They have tried to hire at least 1,200 people starting day one, and day one is 12/01 on January the 20th. So if you think about the totality of the amount of political jobs that are available, 1/3 of them are probably already gone. So we should just be mindful of thinking about that and thinking about what jobs you think you want in the administration, knowing that the job that you want might be gone. So need to be flexible in thinking about what this actually looks like. Do your research. A lot of these jobs are highly technical and specified. I am not a communications person at all. So I know that I don't need to apply for a communications job, in, these agencies. Thinking about what your interest areas are, whether it is treasury, what's your interest, like what's your financial background, whether it is housing. Everything does not sit within the office of the secretary. If you go through the book and you will look at it, a lot of these jobs are very specified, very specific. I've had friends who worked in the International Trade Administration Department, Bureau at the Department of Commerce. So please go down and look through what some of this looks like. Some of these jobs require people who have certain certifications. They're looking for people who have a certain amount of job history. They're looking for people, who understand the nuances of certain things. If you think about the fact that we're in a COVID era right now, if you're going to work at Treasury or SBA or Department of Commerce, they probably want people who have an understanding of the banking and loan industry when thinking about how to go back and redistribute some of the PPP and PPE loans, knowing that we're having difficulty with a lot of Americans being able to access that. If you're thinking about Department of Agriculture is not just farmers. Be very mindful that, SNAP and food stamps are actually within Department of Agriculture. So spend time and go through the books and get a sense of what jobs are really there. One of the things that, Melanie mentioned that I helped her through a process is understanding your networks and your friends. So it's like, while I walked Melanie through the Plum book, she whappened to be on the campaign with the person who ended up being the White House liaison. This world is very small and everyone knows everybody else. So please go through and tap your Rolodex to get a sense of who who might have worked on the campaign, and get a sense of who might be a part of the Biden-Harris transition teams, which are those names are available on their website. And they're rolling out daily who is being hired to work in the administration, and think about what that looks like. Also think through what are your top 5 jobs and be very specific. My understanding is by the time the transition closes its books, they will have over 100,000 applicants on their system. Unfortunately, they don't have time to go through and just pick people who've said that I'll just take any job. You need to be very specific about what jobs you're looking for within what agency. So if you know that you have a housing interest, go through and look at all of the departments that actually focus on housing, because it might not just be HUD. There might be nuanced things within other agencies that focus on housing as well. So be very methodical about what it is you're going to look for. Plan your allies. Who are other people that are in your networks? Who are your elected officials? What groups are you a part of? Whether it is Urban League, whether it's NAACP, whether it is, other groups such as this. Think about your networks and your organizations and talk to them about what they're doing and how they're trying to move people along throughout this process as well. And the last thing I'm gonna leave on is, what does preparation look like? These are very public facing jobs. You can go pull up the Plum book for any administration, find the name of every person that worked in government, and you can Google them. So know that your life is going to be very Googleable and very personal and very public. So be mindful of what your public profile is right now on social media. Because if you decide to apply for a job, people will go through your public life. They will go through your Facebook page, your Instagram, your Twitter. They may ask for passwords if they think that you might have locked something. People take snapshots of things. Think about your financial health, the financial health of your life. If you want to work at Treasury, make sure that your bills are paid. Make sure that your taxes are taken care of. If you want to work at, and Melanie can talk about this, law enforcement agencies, while marijuana is legal in some places, there are certain things that you can't do when you work for some of those agencies. This is a very different process. The forms that you fill out are extensive. They will ask you for an address for every place you've lived, basically since you've turned 18 years of age, and they want the name of a person that they can contact when you lived at that address. You might not have lived there for 10 years. They want to know at least one person that, knew you when you lived there. They, some jobs, they will actually go to your hometown and do a full clearance check. I remember when they went to my hometown, I called my hometown folks, like, it is the real FBI. Like, this is no joke. Like, they will call you for background checks. They will call your friends to do reference checks. And now it's COVID, they might do it on the phone, but they used to meet in person, to do a 10 to 15 minute background check on people for certain levels of clearance. Like, this is a big deal. It is an honor. It was one of the honors of my lifetime to be, to work in the Clinton administration, and you should approach it as such, and think about what your personal life, how this is going to impact your personal life, and think about what your public persona is now that you might need to go through and tamper down if you're trying to apply for some of these jobs. Michelle?
Yes. Wow. Thank you both. I'm completely inspired. It's really wonderful to hear, even after all, the years and the hours, and that you're still so passionate about the work. And thank you for your service. I think, we really appreciate you being there, and I know that with all the reward, there's also sacrifice. And so I definitely thank you and appreciate hearing from you all. We do want to get some questions in. So, everyone on the webinar, please add your questions to the chat. I have a couple things. Nadia, you just talked a little bit about like how technical the jobs are. And so that kind of got me thinking about, there can be a tendency for us to look at something and talk ourselves out of it. So can you tell me a little bit about, like, it's very technical, but, should we still,
yes, you should still apply for the job. So like, one of the things I would say is like,
I mean, like,
do your research.
Do we have to check every box, or, really what is it that they're looking for as far as our experience, if we don't check all the boxes in these very technical? And I don't know that I'm asking that correctly, but when you mentioned that, it did flag for me, like, research shows that women will look at something and say, and meet 9 of the 10 criteria and then say, oh, I'm not going to apply for it. Whereas men will, and not
apply.
Discriminate. Yeah.
One of the things is, every agency in the White House is online. So if you don't know necessarily about the job, but you have an interest in the Bureau, go do more research on the Bureau, because that might actually tell you what you need to know about what some of these positions are. As I said, everyone is primarily on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Go back on LinkedIn and look at the qualifications of the person who currently has the job or used to have the job that was there. I wanted people to think about realistic expectations as well with regards to some of this, right? So just because the title says one thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the jobs. Some of these are special advisor jobs, special assistant jobs. They could mean very different things in, the White House and or agencies. But I want you to think about what your qualifications are. Like, prime example, I've never worked on Capitol Hill. So I know that I should not apply to be senior advisor for legislative affairs in one of these positions. And I see Melanie's face, but I'm just being very honest. Like, so think about, just because the title sounds great, think about what your qualifications are for some of these jobs. And I know me and Melanie and others have had conversations with people about, think about what your qualifications are to do some of these jobs. Like I said, I've never worked on Capitol Hill. I know members. So if you're looking for somebody to have an in-depth legislative policy conversation about the nuances, that is not me. And I know that, right? So that's why I said, do some of your background and research on some of this, and make sure that you're applying for a job that that you can go do on day one, right? Like, some of these jobs, they're not going to handhold you. You're going to literally have to hit the ground sprinting, because one of the reasons why they are trying to get some people hired day one is they now have to go uncover everything that has happened in the past 4 years of the Trump administration, while they're trying to staff up the administration, get secretaries confirmed. Oh, and by the way, walk through President-elect Biden 100-day plan, right? So it's like, a lot of this is you have to hit the ground running. And I'll let Melanie talk about, like, what does hit the ground running mean when you walk in at HUD on day one?
Yeah, so I giggled because I do know some people who were in leg affairs jobs who never worked on the Hill. And they were quite successful. They made it nonetheless. But so I started February 5th, 2009, and I was the first public affairs staffer. I walked in, and our director of our deputy assistant secretary for public affairs, who was a career employee, said, so what do you want us to do? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, you're in charge now, which, was news to me, because I just got there, and I was the press secretary. I was not the assistant secretary, who hadn't been hired yet. So hit the ground running meant I determined the structure of the office. I determined the structure of the office and started hiring people. I think what will be different this time around is that a lot of the career ranks aren't there anymore. Mm-hmm. So in addition to uncovering what exists from a policy perspective, regulations that may have been in process, there's also a lack of institutional knowledge in the federal government, because a lot of the career staff who had been there 10, 20, 25 years, 30, 40 years, they just left because the circumstances of the last 4 years have been as tough on them as they have been on the rest of us. And so there will be less support. So I walked into a fully staffed career. I had maybe 10 or 12 people, a photographer, different portfolio spokespeople. I walked in with full support. I think the person walking into some of these agencies might be walking into an office that has 1 or 2 people in it. And so the need to staff up almost immediately, and having some idea going in of
Mhm.
what the immediate agenda is going to be, so that as you are thinking about staffing and structure. So the way that I structured the office at the time was to have a spokesperson for the Recovery Act and a spokesperson for sort of urban development, poverty related initiatives, because those were the 2 big buckets of things that HUD was doing. And then I had the foreclosure portfolio. So knowing what the big buckets of policy priorities for the agency will be, I'm obviously speaking from a communications perspective too, but no matter what role you're walking into, understanding what the policy priorities are going to be for an agency will be critically important. And there are some roles that are mendable: senior
Yes.
advisor,
Mhm.
special assistants. Walking in on the first day, guess what? You get to decide what your job is, and you get to decide how that job is structured in partnership with whoever your boss is, who you may be meeting for the first time on that day, or you may have met the day before on a Zoom call. But the one of the benefits to coming in on day one is that you set the stage
Mhm.
for how the agency will work, for how it will carry out that first 100 days on behalf of the administration. And there's such great opportunity in that.
Yes.
But there's also a lot of pressure, and it's going to be scary and it's going to be terrifying, but such great opportunity to really create the world you want to live and work in these agencies.
I think it's going to be hard in some cases, just thinking, like I said, because we won't know who else been hired, until they start rolling out staff lists, or rolling out press releases as to who's where. So I think it's going to be hard to get a sense of what's going to even be available until you know what's already gone, which is one of the reasons why I said, make sure you have a list of 4 or 5 positions, because as Melanie said, she was able to go in day one and she was able to go through and hire X, Y, and Z. If there are going to be 1,200 people that are hired, like I said, that's going to leave a small amount of jobs that are left for there. And I say that because there's 40 years of Joe Biden being here in Washington, D.C. So there's 40 years of Joe Biden. There is campaign staff for the primary and the general, and everyone else. So I want to make sure that people don't get discouraged about the timelines, because everyone doesn't get hired day one. Like I said, I came in on the back end of an administration. So it's like I didn't even think about I didn't even know I could actually apply for a job in the administration, being very honest with you, much less end up getting a job in the White House working in personnel. So the timelines might not be day one. The timeline could be 6 months from now. It could be 8 months from now. It could be a year from now, because some people who may go in on day one jobs might not want to continue for year 2, 3, and 4. So there's opportunity to go in at one job and then transition to other jobs within the administration. Because Melanie, how many jobs did you have within the administration?
I had 4. And our office, we didn't fully staff until maybe September of 2009 is when we got the public affairs office fully staffed. I don't remember when all of the appointees for the agency came on board, but I would say it wasn't until 2010 where we were like really operating at full speed. And I left mid 2011 to go work at the DNC, and came back in 2013. And so there were lots of iterations of different staff. And my first choice, coming from the Judiciary Committee, I really wanted to work at DOJ. I got to DOJ in the year 2015.
Yeah.
So in the very last year of the administration. So what I will also say is that just because you don't get your dream job on day one doesn't mean that it's not a possibility.
Correct.
So I definitely hear like patience, flexibility, and persistence.
Yes.
Are paying off. We are getting some questions from people attending. We have a great question from Amy, who says, if you have over 20 years of work experience in the corporate world and have worked full-time on campaigns since 2017, how should she figure out the GS level that she would qualify for at an agency like state or DHS?
I think it's less about the GS level that she qualifies for. It's the job that she applies for, because each job has a GS grade or a SES grade attached to it. So it's more so about the job versus that, but they will definitely go through and look at her pay from her previous career, from her previous jobs, to make that determination. But every job usually has a step and a grade and a range that goes along with that. But there's some negotiation that she can make with regards to that as well.
And that's
And it's
really where like the plum book would come in, looking at that as well, or
maybe, but
yeah.
even in the plum book, the GS level that those people are graded at is based on their level of experience coming in and their past pay. So when you
Okay.
apply, you have to submit salary ranges for the last, I don't remember how many jobs. That's part of the compensation process. But it is not, I will say, you don't necessarily get to ask for a salary range. They tell you here's the range, and then you can negotiate within it. And it is pretty standard. And so there's some flexibility, but not a lot.
Okay.
And for those looking at White House jobs, know that the White House is on a different pay scale. So the White House pay scale is not in the plum book. Each office had their own budget within the White House to go through and negotiate with what that looked like. But, White House salaries, if you Google it, you can Google White House jobs, and there's usually a database that shows you what people made there, but it's not on the traditional GS pay scale.
Okay.
And sometimes those jobs pay less.
Most times.
A lot less.
There's considerable difference.
Yes, yes. So understand that.
But there are offices of the White House, like the Office of Management and Budget, that pay on the GS scale.
Correct. So do your research. Yes.
Okay. Very helpful. So we have another question that's come in. How reliable is the resume bank on the transition website? And do people really get interviewed or hired just off the resume bank? And I just do want to make a plug again for the Blueprint appointment process, as well as the other tables, because we definitely know we want to reference the plum book, and then we also have different portals that people can access to apply and submit their information. And I know the Repro Blueprint appointment, we have a form that has positions that, for sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice in the various agencies. We're particularly interested in a diverse group of people fill those positions. And then we do also somewhat advocate on their behalf with the current transition team, and then eventually the PPO. With PPO, there's also Victory Institute has a portal that is accepting applicants and resumes, as well as several other, like the Raven Group, and there's People of Color portals. So there are all these different avenues, because Nadia, you mentioned it's about your networks and your allies and tapping into as many people that can advocate for you and put their resume in front of the people that need to see them. But so, in your experience though, for each of you, how reliable are these resume banks? And do people, get interviews from these different portals? There are these different avenues that people can take.
I do. I mean, I think this conversation in itself is very helpful, because there are some people who don't have access to, a conversation like this to even walk them through what the plum book is and to talk to people who have gone through the process of working at the White House in personnel. So I think this is a great step. There are going to be, so each cabinet agency has a White House liaison, and the White House liaison is tasked with working with presidential personnel and hiring for the agency. So they will go through and pour through the resumes that have come in for their agency, and will go through and start going through and picking there, in addition to what has come from the transition, and in addition to what's come from outside sources as well. So it does seem like it is a black hole, but it is not a black hole, because they will go through and pull out all the jobs for all the resumes for HUD and all the resumes for X, Y, and Z, in addition to, groups such as this and others that are actually doing the same thing, and they will all get moved over.
Yeah, because it's intimidating. I think you said the number 100,000 applicants by the time, this year is up. That's pretty intimidating. So
Yeah.
That's helpful. Melanie, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I think the one thing I will add is that yes, resumes come from the resume bank, but it is, I would argue it is not enough to just submit your resume there and just let the chips fall where they may. You may get an interview, but I have been telling people to use all of your resources. Now is the time to call in every favor, email every person, and really make sure that people know that you are interested and specifically what you're interested in. If you are interested in working in the administration, but your interest is, I'll do whatever they want me to do, there's no way for that resume to be directed. And so Nadia's advice earlier to make sure you have a top 3, I would say have a top 10. HUD I think was number 6 on my list. And again, it was not the first on my list. It was one of the best work experiences I have ever had. The political team was like family. The career team was like family, and the work was fulfilling. And so be flexible, but make sure that you have a specific idea of where you want to be. Use the Plum Book, talk to your network, get guidance, continue to join conversations like this to really help narrow that list down, and in order to be specific so that people know how to direct your information.
And also spend time on the agency website, right? Like, I think people overlook how much information is there. Like if you're interested in the State Department, every bureau that is there has a portal on the website. Their organization chart is on the website. So you can learn great information about what each bureau does to determine if that's something that you actually want to go through and do. But spend time researching these jobs and researching these agencies and researching these bureaus.
Okay.
Ignore the racism and the misogyny and just go for the org charts.
Correct.
Be very targeted and focused in your
Yeah.
Got it. So a couple more questions for you all, because this is, I think, very helpful. You mentioned before about like our social media, our finances. What other, preparation should people have in mind as they're considering applying? But then even after that, after they've applied, like, what should they expect, and what should they be doing as they're waiting to hear from, a particular agency or the White House?
I think one of the things is, like, you got to definitely practice patience. Like I said, I told you, like, I started interviewing in October of '99, and I didn't get hired till end of February, beginning of March of 2000, right? So it is checking it back in with the people that you're talking to the point where it's like borderline stalking in some cases, right? And I hate to say that, but that's the reality of what this is. Like, you got to borderline stalk people to follow up where you are. Realize that this is not about the money. Right? Like, you are not going to go into this administration and get a $225,000 job. This is not a 9-to-5 job. Everyone who goes in on day one, they literally will be working 7 days a week. So like these are not those types of jobs. These are very selfless jobs, right? So if you are used to doing a lot of self-promoting or talking or whatever on social media, that's not what these jobs are. You have to be about the business of the work, because you're doing work on behalf of the President of the United States of America, right? So think about what that looks like, because you're actually their ambassador, for whatever position it is that you have. Think about the toll that this is going to have on your family with these work hours. It's like you never know what's going to happen. I have friends who worked at FEMA, so it's like when there's an emergency, like they have to pack up and go. Not tomorrow, not in 2 days, they have to go that evening. So just think about what those sacrifices are going to look like on your family. Melanie?
I have a friend who slept on the floor of the command center at FEMA during a particular disaster. Just the storms and those are around the clock type activities. And HUD does disaster recovery. We traveled a lot for disasters. There's, in addition to the in-office requirements, there can be, depending on your role in an agency, a lot of travel. If you're on a leg affairs team, a public affairs team, public engagement, obviously advance, those are the folks that, and in the office of the secretary, those are the folks that are going to be doing a fair amount of traveling. The other thing I would study a lot. So because if you really want to hit the ground running, knowing the issues before the agency currently, both in the news cycle, but also in the policy cycle. So the website can tell you a lot about what policies the agency is working toward. So if it's the Department of Justice, knowing what cases they have on their caseload, what are the things that will be happening when you walk in that door. If a lot of communications folks, I had no housing policy experience, but you would have never known that when I walked in on day one, because I studied, and we were in the middle of a housing and economic crisis. I'm not an econ expert, and I couldn't speak necessarily fluently on the sort of fluctuating real estate market, but I could craft a narrative around the news of the day on the housing market, because I was keeping up with it. I knew who the key reporters were already. I knew who I would need to touch base with and how. I knew the departments, the areas of the department, the different assistant secretaries and the different divisions of the department, and who did what and how those divisions work together. That's all information that's publicly available, and will benefit you to know on day one walking in the door, whether that day one is on January 20th or whether it is June 20th. You will be expected to hit the ground running. And so it's really important to have a sense of the landscape, the lay of the land, before walking in those doors.
And that information will also be helpful to you in interviews, because you don't know who all you're interviewing with, right? Because you could start off interviewing with somebody within the White House Liaison's office. They may kick it back to the White House, and you might have multiple interviews with potential people who could be your boss who are going to ask you these detailed type questions. So, if you had to go interview with Melanie, I know the type of questions Melanie was going to go through and ask, because Melanie is going to expect that you have done your homework before you come and interview with her for a position. So spend time on the Biden-Harris transition page, because they go through and list out their priorities, not just for the first 100 days, but their priorities in general. Take that, overlay that with the agencies that you want to go work for. And as Melanie said, go through and do your homework, and then go through and look at the various bureaus and see who's there and what the agency is tasked to do.
Okay, I don't want to interview with Melanie.
I'm a easy breezy.
I don't believe it. So I just want to ask one more question, because you provided so much information. What's the one thing you wish somebody had told you before you started in your different positions? Because Melanie, I know you've had multiple. So what's the one thing you wish you knew going in?
I think for me, being that young at the White House would have been budgeting, because some jobs at the White House pay so little that they allowed you to get a part-time job.
You mean personal budgeting?
Personal budgeting.
Gotcha.
So like, I had colleagues who worked at the White House in the daytime and were waitresses at night, because it's not the money you think it is, right? So thinking through how you're going to go and do this great job, but also make ends meet, So it's like, I literally had to, it wasn't like I didn't have a bad budget, but like this was because I basically took a pay cut to go do the White House job, because it's a job of the White House. You're not going to turn the White House job down, but it definitely had an impact on my finances and how I had to go through and do at times 7-day-a-week job, working in the White House and taking care of other personal responsibilities.
I was gonna say, I didn't really have an answer because I think I've said a lot of the things that I didn't know going in, but somebody has lifted in the chat, collecting all the information for the SF-86. So the
Ooh.
SF-86 and that's like a big deal. I didn't know anything about that. So the SF-86 is the form that you are required to fill out for security clearance and background check. Even if you are not in a role that requires a high level security clearance, you will have to undergo a background check. And that's what Nadia was talking about earlier. The FBI, no matter what level you are at, will collect this information through the SF-86. And it requires the addresses and names of people you've known for 10 years back, places you've traveled, people you connected with in those places you traveled for the last 10 years. My husband, who also worked in the federal government, lived in Asia for like 2.5 years before coming and traveled to the entire Asian continent. And like his SF-86 was incredibly difficult to fill out because he had traveled so much. And so, and there's a lot of you have to do financial disclosures.
Mm-hmm.
So all of your assets, including retirement funds, if you've changed jobs a lot or moved around a lot, if you have worked on a lot of campaigns. So I know a lot of my friends had done Nadia. You've worked on campaigns for the last 10 years, which means you've lived in 18 different places. Sometimes it was a hotel, sometimes it was supporter housing. All of that needs to be included. And so if you can start thinking about the places you've lived, the places you've worked, and contact information for people in all of those places now, that will help you. That will help you with your SF-86 form. I guess the other thing, I also want to put a finer point on something that Nadia talked about. When the Obama administration started, and I know this wasn't an issue, I mean, the Clinton administration, social media didn't exist, and Twitter was still sort of a place where we put press releases in 2008. 2009 is when it really started to become a place for conversations. I think that people have very, very big social media presences today. That will need to stop completely. There's no, whatever comes out of your mouth in a room full of people, on the metro, on social media, will be quoted as a Biden administration official. And the responsibility of that is grave. And it will require incredible judgment. If you have been running a blog on the side, you will need to consider that. If you have been creating a brand for yourself in advance of getting this role in the Biden administration, there will need to be a shift. I'm a communicator. I'm on all communications platforms. I did not tweet when I worked in the administration on my own behalf. I had an official account where I promoted the administration's work. And when my role ended, that official account was archived. But there was no personal tweeting. I found it to be stressful and very difficult. I had an assistant who mistakenly tweeted about the Trump campaign from the DOJ official account. It was an accident, but she was trying to do both. And I use that as an illustration. It just really can create problems that you don't want to have, and everything is a risk to the work of the administration. And so I would strongly caution beginning to wind or think about winding down a social media presence.
And it's not just you, it's your partner and your spouse as well. So it's everyone that's in your household, right? So because they're going to think that you co-signed whatever it is they are doing on social media. So sometimes that can come back and have repercussions on you as well.
We've seen it happen with George and what's the lady? You know, the lady in the Trump administration.
I know. I was just thinking about
Kellyanne
Conway and George Conway. Yes,
yeah,
it's a perfect example. Everything George Conway says, he is saying is Kellyanne Conway's wife.
So it's like what you used to do before, you need to think about what's more important, because you are representing the Biden-Harris administration, and that comes first and foremost. So whatever public profile you used to have, it's going to go away.
And you have a choice to
Yes.
make here. And if that's not something you're interested in, you don't have to take the job. You don't have to work in the administration. That is part of the responsibility of being a public servant, is really serving the public good and serving at the will and pleasure of the President of the United States.
Yeah, I heard that when I first moved to DC. Like, everyone is political here, so be careful of the conversations in the coffee shop or on the bus or just anywhere, because you never know who is around you. Yeah, I definitely heard that, and something I'd never, coming from the Midwest, had never even occurred to me that people would care what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had I don't remember if it was while I was at the DMC, but some interns were on the Metro talking about their work, and it got reported the next day in conservative media. I don't remember if it was while I was there or after, but that happens all the time. There was just a story last week about the Project Veritas guy talking about Project Veritas business on the Amtrak train. There are reporters and people who want to be reporters everywhere in Washington.
Right. Well, this has been great. I could, talk to you all evening, it would seem, but are there any last things that you want to share before we start wrapping up?
It'll be the most rewarding experience of your lifetime. Like, I was very fortunate to work at the White House, and I remember the days of walking the halls and you never know who you're going to see or what activities are going to happen. I remember, my last day there, like seeing Marine One land on the South Lawn of the White House for the Clinton administration for the last time. Like, I remember helping, certain individuals go through Senate confirmation who end up becoming cabinet secretaries. There's just things that you will never forget. Like, these are priceless memories that you will cherish and carry with you literally the rest of your life. The relationships that you have, because you're working together all the time, are family, and I still have friends. I'm still friends with the same group of people I worked in personnel with, umpteen years ago. Their spouses, their children, the whole 9 yards. Like, it becomes a family. So if you have the opportunity to do this, then please do it. It will change your life. And I know that the country will be better for your service.
Yeah, I was just looking at the participant list, and a lot of that family, a lot of people that I've known over the course of my career on this call, a lot of people who worked in government with me before. This is everything Nadia said. It really is one of the best experiences you can have. Extraordinarily fulfilling, incredibly impactful, and just to think of the work that can be done, the work that's on the horizon right now, is the impact that you can have, turning things around, turning this country back around to really serve all Americans and lift up and serve the most vulnerable in particular, to solve this COVID-19 crisis and the economic fallout of the COVID-19 crisis. These are big, big problems, but to be a part of the solution, this is how you create that family, is because you are in it with these people, spending a lot of hours together, working really hard. And it's just incredibly fulfilling. And I'll just leave with one thing, is that apparently Tallahassee creates greatness, because I too was in college in Tallahassee, Florida, at Florida A&M University. We overlapped only a brief while. Nadia and I didn't meet until we came to Washington, but here we are. And it's great to have spent this time sharing wisdom with my very good friend. And I wish all of you much luck and success in working to get into the administration. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, the thanks is to you too. This has been very informative, as particularly as someone who has never worked for the federal government. This has been enlightening, and so really appreciate your wisdom, your insight, and just sharing your knowledge with us. I don't know anything about Tallahassee, but I do know HBCUs, and they do produce great things, Spelman here. I do want to, everything you've said, I know has resonated with everyone on this call. So now we definitely want the people on the call to apply. And so our call to action for you is to go to Build Back Better and apply. Go to, and the links have been shared, we can share them again. Go to the Repro Blueprint portal and apply. Go to as many application portals as you can find. And then, as Nadia and Melanie have said, then work your connections, work your alliances, talk to people in the community that could be a resource, talk to your elected officials, let them know you're interested. The more people that know, the more people that can start advocating for you. So once again, Nadia and Melanie, thank you so much. Really an honor to be able to benefit from your experience. So thank you all, and we'll just go ahead and say goodbye. Thanks for everyone that joined us, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.